Have you ever felt like you're constantly trying to prove you're a good person? Always filtering what you say, hiding what you feel, covering up parts of yourself, just so you won't disappoint anyone? But the more you try to be good, the more you feel like you're losing something essential, yourself. And here's something no one really talks about. This constant effort to be accepted, to be right, pulls you further away from who you truly are. Yes, you, the one who tries to please everyone, who swallows their words, who can't say no, who smiles when they actually want to scream. You were taught that feeling anger is wrong, that envy is a sin, that jealousy is ugly. So you learn to hide it all, but what you repress stays alive inside you. It builds up tension, influences your behavior, sabotages your choices, and eventually it bursts out in a rage, a panic attack, an impulsive decision you can't even explain. That's why Jung said, "I'd rather be whole," because only when you face your ugly sides, only when you acknowledge your own shadow, can you become truly strong. And no, this is not an invitation to sink into the darkness. It's an invitation to turn on the light. Stick with me till the end of this video, because today we're going to expose the illusion of idealized goodness and show you why embracing who you really are might be the beginning of your true freedom. And if this message resonates with you, go ahead and subscribe and turn on notifications. That way YouTube knows to show you more content like this when it's out. The phrase, "I'd rather be whole than good," isn't just striking, it's an invitation. A call to a journey that very few have the courage to take. These words come from Carl Gustav Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who transformed how we understand the human psyche. Jung wasn't giving us permission to act however we want without consequences. He was talking about something much deeper. The courage to look within and see everything that's there. Not just the pretty parts, not just what gets applause, but also the fear, the envy, the anger, the neediness, the manipulation, all the things we've learned to hide because someone told us they were wrong, that they were ugly, that they were bad. For Jung, the shadow isn't evil in itself. It's everything we've pushed out of our conscious awareness because we believed it wasn't acceptable. But it doesn't go away. It stays there, operating in the dark, influencing our choices, our relationships, our entire lives. And the more we pretend those parts don't exist, the more power they have over us. So here's the question. Why do we choose to be good over being whole? Why is it so hard to face the parts of ourselves we don't like? Maybe because it's easier to mistake shadow for evil than to admit that we all have impulses, desires, and wounds that don't match the image we want to show the world. But here's the shift. Integrating the shadow doesn't mean surrendering to it. It means facing it with awareness, taking responsibility, transforming it. Because when we bring light to what's been in the dark, we reclaim our power. Everything you've heard so far is just the beginning. Now we're going to dive deeper. We'll explore step by step how this idea of being good was built and how you can begin to free yourself from it without becoming a bad person. Do you think it's possible to embrace your own shadow and still be a good person? Let me know what you think in the comments. The idea of being good sounds harmless, even noble. Since childhood, we've heard things like be a good boy, be a nice girl, behave. And so we learned that being accepted meant being pleasant. That love came as a reward for good behavior. But here's the problem. That image of goodness doesn't come from our inner truth. It comes from an external expectation, one that tells us what's acceptable and what must be hidden. That's where the shadow is born. In Jung's view, the shadow is made up of everything we repress in ourselves to maintain this image of being good. Anger, pride, lust, vanity, fear, envy, greed. Not because these things are always destructive, but because at some point, we were taught they weren't acceptable. Now think about this. If you learned early on that feeling anger was wrong, what did you do with that anger? Did it just disappear? Evaporate? No, it built up. And it started showing up in disguised ways. Sarcasm, bottled up irritation, passive aggressiveness, or sheer exhaustion from being nice all the time. That's the price of trying to be good all the time. You end up living a limited version of yourself, a persona that pleases others but lacks vitality, someone who smiles but is falling apart inside. But here's the point. Your shadow is not your enemy. The shadow is the map. It shows you exactly where you've lost touch with yourself. For instance, envy might be a clue to something you deeply desire but haven't dared to admit. Anger could be a sign that your boundaries were crossed. Pride might be a signal that you need to value yourself more after being overlooked for too long. The problem isn't feeling these things. The problem is repressing them, hiding them, pretending they don't exist. And when you do that, they don't disappear. They act from the dark. They shape your decisions, sabotage your relationships, wreck your self-esteem, and all of it happens without you even realizing. Here's a practical analogy. Imagine your psyche as a house, and everything you find ugly or inappropriate, you throw into a dark basement. You lock the door, pretend it's not there, but over time, that basement starts to overflow. A strange smell creeps out. The voices down there get louder, and one day, it all comes upstairs and takes over the living room. What Jung suggests isn't blindly embracing everything in that basement. It's turning on the light, seeing what's there, understanding what those parts are trying to tell you. Because every emotion, no matter how uncomfortable, carries a vital psychological function. Fear can be a legitimate alarm. Anger might be a call for respect. Sadness may be an invitation to go inward. Envy might be a push toward action. When you integrate these emotions, you don't become more aggressive, unstable, or selfish. You become more aware. But here's another problem. Modern culture doesn't value wholeness. It values performance. Social media rewards constant smiling, toxic positivity, good vibes only, as if everyone is enlightened all the time. If you show vulnerability, you're seen as weak. If you express anger, you're canceled. If you feel envy, you're judged. The result? A world full of people smiling on the outside while collapsing on the inside. And the more we perform this artificial goodness, the further we move away from real goodness, the kind that comes from self-understanding, from honest contact with our emotions, from acknowledging our own limits. Jung said that no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That's the whole point of integrating the shadow. It's not about surrendering to your darker impulses. It's about recognizing them, understanding them, transforming them. Let's take a practical example. Imagine you have controlling tendencies and it's affecting your relationships. The solution isn't to pretend you're not like that or to feel ashamed. It's to ask, where is this need for control coming from? What are you afraid of losing? What are you trying to protect? That's where the shift begins. Because the moment you do that, you're no longer being controlled by your shadow. You're taking conscious ownership. This doesn't make you perfect, but it does make you whole, more grounded, and ironically, more trustworthy. Because now your actions aren't being driven by feelings you're trying to deny. Let's pause here for a moment. Take a deep breath. Maybe you're remembering a situation where you acted impulsively, said something you didn't mean, reacted in a way that scared you. And afterward, you asked yourself, why did I do that? The answer might be in the shadow. And that's okay, because we all have one. The difference is in who has the courage to look. One of the biggest misconceptions about the shadow is thinking that integrating it is a one-time thing, like a therapy session, a spiritual breakthrough, a moment of catharsis, and done. But integrating the shadow is an ongoing process, a practice. Because the shadow never stops forming. Every time you repress something, shape yourself to please others, pretend you don't feel, something gets pushed into the dark. And the more awareness you develop, the more you begin to see what was still hidden. That's why this path requires humility, and above all, responsibility. Because recognizing your shadow doesn't give you permission to act impulsively or hurt others. On the contrary, shadow integration is what gives you the power to choose instead of just reacting. You're no longer at the mercy of your emotions. You welcome them, listen to them, and choose what to do with them. Here's a practical example. Let's say you feel jealous, and instead of repressing or denying it, you observe it. You ask yourself, what's behind this? Fear of loss? Insecurity? Comparison? When you do this, jealousy stops being a monster and becomes a message. A message that can lead to healing. Now think of the opposite. Someone who denies their jealousy, says it's nothing, acts like they don't care. That person is handing the wheel to the shadow, and sooner or later it will explode. Sabotage, strangle the relationship. That's why Jung said that confronting the shadow is the hardest work one can undertake, but also the most rewarding. Because as you bring light into those hidden parts, something powerful happens. You start to realize that those parts also contain talents, strengths, and dormant potential. The shadow isn't only made of flaws, it also contains suppressed aspects of your brilliance, the power to say no, raw creativity, free sexuality, legitimate ambition, the ability to lead, to take a stand, to shine, even if it makes others uncomfortable. How many avoid fully experiencing their sensuality because they were taught it was wrong? Those too are parts of the shadow, and integrating them is essential to living in truth. Here's a powerful analogy. The shadow is like a muscle you've ignored for years. At first, it's weak, stiff, and scary to move. But once you start working with it, you realize it gives you structure, strength, stability. Integrating the shadow means expanding your awareness, but more than that, it means reclaiming parts in yourself that were taken away by guilt, shame, or the fear of not being accepted. Which brings us to another crucial point, the collective shadow. Because it's not just you who has a shadow. We as a society have one too. And this collective shadow shows up in subtle and sometimes dangerous ways. Prejudice, exclusion, fanaticism, idealization. These are all symptoms of a shadow the group projects to avoid looking at itself. When you see a group attacking the other, rejecting different perspectives, labeling, canceling, punishing, that's the shadow at work. A desperate attempt to protect an illusion of purity at the cost of denying our shared humanity. And here's the danger. When the shadow is repressed too much, it turns destructive. Not because it's evil, but because it's starving for space. That's why integrating the shadow is also an act of collective courage, a step toward emotional maturity, both individually and socially. It means breaking the cycle of denial and stepping into responsibility. Jung said no one becomes conscious without pain, but that pain is the cost of living authentically. So if you're feeling discomfort as you watch this, that's actually a good sign. It means something inside you is moving, and that movement might be the beginning of something much bigger. It's not about choosing between being good or being whole. It's realizing that the only way to truly be good is to have the courage to be whole. Because real goodness doesn't come from repression. It comes from clarity, from recognizing the shadow, and from making the conscious choice to act from the light, not out of fear, but out of freedom. But there's something even more challenging than integrating your own shadow. It's realizing that even after all of this, we still tend to throw our shadow onto others, in silent judgments, in comparisons, in how we react to people who trigger what we refuse to see in ourselves. Have you ever wondered why certain types of people irritate you so much? Why some behaviors hit you in a way that feels completely disproportionate? Maybe they're showing you something you don't want to see. If you want to understand how we project our shadows and how that deeply affects our relationships, our decisions, and even our sense of identity. The next video might help you see all of it with greater clarity. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.